Legends have always held a strange place in the human imagination. They're stories that live longer than the people who first told them, passed down through centuries, reshaped by countless voices, and often warped by exaggeration. Many serve as moral lessons, warning tales, or explanations for mysteries our ancestors couldn't understand. Some were dismissed outright by scholars, labeled as folklore or fable with no historical foundation. But history has a habit of hiding its secrets in plain sight, and time after time, discoveries have forced experts to reconsider what they thought they knew. Sometimes the truth behind a legend is not just relit as even stranger and more dramatic than the story itself. Today, we were counting down 10 legendary tales once thought to be pure myth, but later proven to have roots in reality. And to start, we travel from the battlefields of ancient epics to the darkest depths of the sea. #10. The City of Troy. From Homer's myth to archaeological reality. For over 2,000 years, the city of Troy lived only in the verses of Homer's Iliad, an epic poem filled with gods, heroes, and war. According to the story, Troy was a magnificent city in Asia Minor, wealthy beyond imagination, with walls so strong they could withstand a decade-long siege. The Trojan War, sparked by the abduction or elopement of Helen, wife of the Spartan king Menelaus, drew the greatest warriors of the Greek world to its gates. We all know the rest: Achilles' rage, Hector's bravery, and the cunning Trojan horse that sealed the city's fate. But for centuries, most historians dismiss this as legend, a symbolic tale of honor and hubris, not a real historical conflict. That belief began to crumble in the late 19th century, when Heinrich Schliemann, self-made millionaire with a passion for archaeology, set out to prove the skeptics wrong. He scoured Homer's descriptions, noting geographical hints. A city near the Dardanelles, overlooking the Aegean, with fertile plains nearby. 1870, he began excavations at Asurlik, in modern-day Turkey. What he uncovered stunned the academic world. Layer upon layer of ancient cities built atop one another, a clear sign of continuous habitation over millennia. One layer in particular showed signs of violent destruction. Collapsed stone walls, buildings reduced to rubble, arrowheads embedded in the earth, and charred remains suggesting a massive fire. This layer dated to around the 12th or 13th century BCE, aligning with the period scholars believed the Trojan War might have occurred. Among the finds was a cache of gold and jeweled ornaments, what Schliemann dramatically called Priam-S treasure, though the dating suggests it belonged to an earlier phase of the city. Regardless, the discoveries proved that Troy was not just a poet's invention. It had been a real, thriving city, rich, fortified, and strategically important, exactly as Homer described. While debates still rage over whether the war unfolded as the epic tells it, the idea that a great conflict was fought there is no longer far. Troy stepped out of the realm of myth and planted its flag firmly in history. #9. The Kraken. From sailor's nightmare to deep-sea reality, in the days of wooden ships and global exploration, the ocean was a place of both opportunity and terror. Sailors returning from voyages in the North Atlantic spoke of a creature so large its body could be mistaken for an island. With tentacles capable of pulling entire ships beneath the waves, they called it the Kraken, a name that would echo in sea shanties, maps, and legends for centuries. According to the lore, the Kraken lurked off the coasts of Norway and Greenland, lying in wait for unsuspecting vessels. Some claimed it could create whirlpools simply by diving beneath the surface, dragging ships down in a deadly spiral. For 18th century sailors, the Kraken was as real a danger as storms or pirates. Naturalists of the time scoffed at such stories, attributing them to drunken exaggeration, misidentifications of whales, or sightings of floating masses of seaweed. But the persistence of similar reports from different crews and different nations hinted at something more. In the mid-19th century, evidence began to surface literally. The carcasses of enormous cephalopods, some with tentacles over 30 feet long, washed ashore in Newfoundland and the Azores. These remains suggested the sailor's monster had a real-life counterpart. The definitive breakthrough came in the 21st century, when Japanese marine biologists captured the first-ever footage of a living giant squid Architeuthis in its natural habitat. The video was eerie, a massive, ghostly shape gliding through the deep. its tentacles twisting with almost alien grace, and its dinner plate-sized eyes reflecting the light. Measuring over 43 feet from tip to tip, it was a predator perfectly adapted to the crushing darkness of the deep ocean. While it doesn't attack ships, its power and size are enough to explain centuries of fear. And here's the chilling part. Over 80% of the ocean remains unexplored. The giant squid, once dismissed as a sailor's hallucination, is proof that enormous, mysterious creatures do exist beneath the waves. If one myth turned out to be real, who's to say others aren't still lurking in the depths? These two stories are just the beginning. As we move forward, the line between fiction and fact will blur even further, and you will see how some of the world's most incredible legends have been hiding the truth in plain sight for centuries. Number 8. El Dorado. The city of gold that wasn't entirely a fantasy, the legend of El Dorado is perhaps the most intoxicating treasure story in history. It began in the early 1500s, when Spanish conquistadors arrived in South America, and heard tales from indigenous tribes about a place of unimaginable wealth. In some versions, El Dorado was not a city at all, but a mana, tribal chief, who would cover his entire body in shimmering gold dust during a sacred ceremony, then dive into a lake while his people cast gold and precious stones into the waters as offerings to the gods. Other versions transformed the legend into a sprawling city built entirely of gold, hidden deep in the uncharted jungles. The story spread like wildfire through Europe, igniting an obsession that would send countless expeditions into the wilderness. The search for El Dorado became a deadly pursuit. Men like Gonzalo Pizarro and Francisco de Orellana ventured into the Amazon, facing swarms of insects, deadly wildlife, starvation, and hostile encounters. Many never returned. Even Sir Walter Raleigh made 2 attempts to find the fabled city in what is now Venezuela, losing men and ships in the process. 2 Europeans, desperate for glory and riches. The thought of returning home with even a fraction of El Dorado as gold was worth any risk. For centuries, historians wrote the legend off as a mixture of native customs misunderstood by foreigners and outright exaggeration fueled by greed. But in the 20th century, the story gained new credibility. Archaeological digs at Lake Guatavita in Colombia revealed that it had indeed been a ceremonial site for the Muisca people. Divers recovered golden ornaments and intricate jewelry from the lake bed, proof that offerings had been thrown into the water for centuries. Then came the discovery of the Muisca raft, a masterpiece of pre-Columbian gold work depicting a central figure, likely a chief, surrounded by attendants on a raft, all adorned with detailed headdresses and ornaments. The resemblance to the legendary Golden Man ceremony was striking. The truth? There was no single city of gold waiting to be found. But the Muisca rituals, their extraordinary goldsmithing skills, their sacred lake ceremonies had planted a seed in European minds. Over time, that seed grew into a towering legend that drew explorers across oceans and into the heart of one of the most dangerous landscapes on Earth. El Dorado might not have been real in the way treasure hunters imagined, but it was far from a complete fantasy. Number 7. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Mythical wonder or historical reality? The Hanging Gardens of Babylon have long been celebrated as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Lush paradise rising high above the arid plains of Mesopotamia. Ancient Greek historians like Strabo and Philo of Byzantium described them in vivid detail. Tiered terraces overflowing with exotic trees and flowers, cool shade from palms and vines, and an ingenious irrigation system that brought water from the distant Euphrates River. According to legend, King Nebuchadnezzar II built the gardens in the 6th century BCE for his wife Amytis of Media, who missed the green hills of her homeland. It was a love story grand enough to be immortalized for over 2 millennia. But there was a problem. Babylonian records make no mention of the gardens. Clay tablets and inscriptions from Nebuchadnezzar's reign, which document his building projects in great detail, are silent about any such wonder. Archaeologists, digging at the site of Babylon, have found magnificent structures, but no trace of the engineering marvel the Greeks described. This led many scholars to conclude that the Hanging Gardens were simply a myth, perhaps a mix of poetic exaggeration and misinterpretation of smaller-scale gardens that did exist. Then came a radical new theory from Oxford scholar Stephanie Daly in the late 20th century. Re-examining ancient Assyrian and Babylonian texts, she noticed something curious. The descriptions of the gardens, their irrigation systems, and their towering height matched the boasts of King Sennacherib of Assyria, not Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. Sennacherib's palace at Nineveh, hundreds of miles north of Babylon, was known to have extensive gardens. More importantly, archaeological evidence revealed massive aqueducts, stone channels, and inscriptions describing a wonder for all peoples that transported water from miles away. These engineering feats were far ahead of their time. Massive stone arches supporting water channels, screw-like devices for lifting water, and terraces capable of sustaining large trees in an otherwise dry environment. The Greek writers who recorded the Hanging Gardens may have been describing Nineveh's wonder, but mistakenly attributed it to Babylon, perhaps due to the fame of Nebuchadnezzar's city. Today, while the debate isn't entirely settled, the evidence strongly suggests that the Hanging Gardens or something remarkably similar did exist. They may have stood not in Babylon but in Assyria, built by a king whose ambition was as towering as his terraces. The legend was misplaced in geography, but not in reality, proving once again that myths often contain more truth than we think. Number 6. The Lost City of Heracleion. Egypt's sunken port brought back to life for more than 1,000 years. Heracleion was a ghost of history, a name preserved only in the works of Herodotus, Strabo, and a few faded Egyptian inscriptions. Ancient texts painted it as a thriving port city near the mouth of the Nile, bustling with trade, religious ceremonies, and political intrigue. It was said to be the main entry point for all ships arriving from the Mediterranean, a city where Egyptian priests greeted foreign dignitaries and where vast markets overflowed with spices, wine, textiles, and exotic goods from as far away as Greece and Phoenicia. According to Greek legend, it was here that Heracles first set foot in Egypt, where Helen of Troy and Paris sheltered before the events that sparked the Trojan War. Over time, Heracleion disappeared, not just physically, but from maps and collective memory. Some historians suspected the city never existed at all, imagining that the name might have been a poetic stand-in for Thaounis, another ancient port. But without ruins to study, the debate remained unresolved, and the legend of Heracleion slipped into the realm of myth. Everything changed in 2000, when French underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio set out to map the seafloor of Aboukir Bay using advanced sonar and magnetometers. The technology revealed strange geometric shapes buried beneath meters of sand and silt. When divers descended, they found themselves in a lost world. Massive temple foundations, colossal statues of pharaohs and gods, inscribed granite steles, and more than 60 shipwrecks, all astonishingly well preserved. Some statues stood over 16 feet tall. Others depicted Egyptian deities in stunning detail, their features untouched by time thanks to their watery grave. Researchers discovered that Heracleion was built on low-lying, unstable ground. Over centuries, earthquakes, floods, and a geological process known as liquefaction caused large sections of the city to sink into the sea. Around the 8th century CE, it disappeared entirely beneath the waves, where it remained hidden for over a millennium. Artifacts recovered from the site, gold coins, ceremonial boats, intricately carved amulets, matched the descriptions in ancient texts almost exactly, proving that this mythical city had been real all along. The rediscovery of Heracleion not only solved a centuries-old mystery, but also reminded the world that the sea still guards entire chapters of human history, waiting to be uncovered. Number 5. The Curse of King Tut's Tomb. From newspaper sensation to eerie reality, when Howard Carter finally discovered the sealed tomb of Pharaoh Tunkamen in 1922, after years of searching, it was a moment of triumph for archaeology. The tomb lay hidden in the Valley of the Kings, virtually untouched since the young pharaoh's burial over 3,000 years earlier. Inside were treasures beyond imagination: a solid gold coffin, dazzling jewelry, ceremonial chariots, weapons, and delicate artifacts crafted with exquisite detail. The world was captivated, but fascination soon turned to fear when people connected with the excavation began to die under strange circumstances. The first and most famous was Lord Carnarvon, Carter's patron, who financed the costly search. Just weeks after the tomb was opened, Carnarvon suffered a mosquito bite on his cheek, which became infected after he accidentally cut it while shaving. He developed blood poisoning and died suddenly in Cairo. Newspapers seized on the story, fueling public hysteria with sensational headlines about the pharaoh's curse. The legend was fed further when, on the night of Carnarvon's death, all the lights in Cairo reportedly went out, and back in England, his dog supposedly let out a howl and died at the same moment. Over the next decade, more deaths were linked to the curse. An Egyptian prince who visited the tomb was assassinated. An American millionaire died shortly after viewing it, a radiologist, who X-rayed the mummy, fell ill and never recovered, and several other members of the excavation team died unexpectedly. The press wove these incidents into a gripping narrative and ancient warning come to life. Some tomb inscriptions elsewhere in Egypt had warned that those who disturbed the pharaoh's rest would face death. And though none were found in Tutankhamun's tomb, the legend was too good for journalists to resist. Skeptics argued that coincidence, tropical diseases, and the harsh conditions of early 20th century travel explained the fatalities. But modern researchers added a chilling scientific possibility: toxic mold and bacteria. Sealed tombs can harbor deadly microorganisms, and fungal spores like aspergillus could cause fatal infections, particularly in those with weakened immune systems. Tests on artifacts from other tombs have confirmed the presence of such pathogens. It's possible that Carnarvon and others inhaled these invisible killers. When the tomb's ancient air was disturbed, Howard Carter himself lived another 17 years, seemingly immune to the supposed curse. But the pattern of sudden, often bizarre deaths kept the story alive. To this day, the curse of King Tut remains one of the most famous legends in archaeology, not because it's necessarily supernatural, but because it blends history, science, and coincidence in a way that makes it impossible to completely dismiss. Number 4. The Legend of the Amazons. Fierce warrior women who actually existed in the epic tapestry of Greek mythology. The Amazons stood apart from all other characters. They were a society of fearless warrior women, living without men, raising their daughters to be soldiers from birth. Ancient authors like Herodotus, Strabo, and Plutarch described them as unmatched archers and horse riders feared across the known world. In stories, they clashed with legendary heroes. Hercules had to steal the girdle of Queen Hippolyta. Achilles fought and killed Queen Penthesilea during the Trojan War, and Theseus abducted the Amazon queen Antiope. The imagery was vivid. Women in armor, their hair loose in battle, wielding bows, spears, and shields. Some Greek writers even claimed they cauterized one breast to make archery a racket. Detail most modern historians now see as symbolic or exaggerated. For centuries, scholars considered the Amazons a purely symbolic creation, a fantasy concocted by Greek men fascinated and threatened by the idea of powerful women. They were seen as mythological Mirza, warning about what might happen if women abandoned their proper roles. But then archaeology began to tell a different story. Starting in the late 20th century, excavations of burial mounds, known as Kurganzin, the steppes of Ukraine, southern Russia, and Kazakhstan, uncovered startling evidence. Among the Scythian nomads who roamed these lands over 2,500 years ago were women buried with full warrior honors, quivers filled with arrows, composite bows, iron swords, and even horse harnesses. Analysis of the skeletal remains revealed healed and unhealed battle wounds, as well as muscular development consistent with archery and horseback riding. In some cemeteries, up to 1/3 of the warrior graves belonged to women. This was no anomaly. Female warriors were a consistent part of Scythian life. Genetic testing confirmed the sex of these remains, eliminating the old idea that these graves were misidentified young men. The geographical match was striking. Greek authors often placed the Amazons beyond the Black Sea, precisely where the Scythians lived. Even Herodotus, often accused of mixing fact and fable, recorded that the Greeks once fought a group of warrior women in battle, captured them, and brought them by ship only for the women to escape and ride deep into the steppes where they joined with local tribes. Whether this specific tale is true or not, the archaeological evidence makes one thing clear: the Amazons were not pure fantasy. They were rooted in real encounters with fierce women who rode, hunted, and fought alongside men, reshaping our understanding of ancient gender roles. Number 3. The myth of Viking sunstones. ancient navigation tool proven real. The Vikings were not just warriors and raiders. They were master navigators who crossed vast, unpredictable oceans long before the invention of the compass. Norse sagas hinted at a mysterious object called the sunstone, said to guide sailors by revealing the sun, its position even on cloudy days or during twilight. Skeptics dismissed it as a metaphor or a poetic flourish. After all, how could a piece of crystal help you find the sun when it was hidden by thick clouds or below the horizon? The answer lay in a property of light called polarization. Certain translucent crystals, like Iceland spar, a form of calcite, can filter polarized light in a way that makes the direction of sunlight visible, even when it's blocked by clouds or fog. By rotating the crystal and observing patterns of light and shadow, a skilled navigator could pinpoint the sun's position with surprising accuracy. For years, this was just a theory. Then, in 2011, archaeologists excavating the Alderney, a 16th-century English shipwreck, found a piece of Iceland spar near navigational equipment. When tested, the crystal could still locate the sun's position on a completely overcast day. Though the Alderney was not a Viking ship, the find proved that mariners in the North Atlantic were using optical crystals for navigation, making it entirely plausible that the Vikings had mastered this technique centuries earlier. Experimental archaeology has since shown how effective sunstones could be. In tests, researchers placed skilled users in simulated fog and cloud cover, and they were able to determine their direction within a few degrees of accuracy, good enough to keep a ship on course across open sea. Combined with Viking knowledge of ocean swells, bird flight paths, and coastal landmarks, sunstones would have been an invaluable tool for voyages from Norway to Iceland, Greenland, and even Vinland, believed to be modern-day Newfoundland. The saga's references to sunstones were not poetic nonsense. They were early descriptions of a real and sophisticated navigational aid. Far from being lucky guesswork, Viking seamanship was rooted in science and skill, and the rediscovery of sunstones proves that some of their most mythical abilities were entirely real. Number 2. The legend of the Great Flood. Ancient myths backed by geological evidence. Few myths are as widespread and deeply rooted as the Great Flood. Versions of it appear in the sacred texts of major religions, in oral traditions of indigenous peoples, and in the literature of ancient civilizations. In the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, the survivor Utnapishtim is warned by the gods to construct a massive boat, preserving life from an earth-destroying deluge. The Book of Genesis tells the story of Noah, chosen by God to save his family in pairs of every animal. Hindu mythology describes Manu, who is warned by Vishnu in the form of a fish, and guided to safety as the waters rise. Similar accounts come from Native American tribes, from the Chinese tale of Emperor Yu controlling floodwaters, to Pacific Island legends where the ocean swallowed entire islands. For centuries, many scholars believe these accounts were symbolic, designed to convey moral lessons about humility before divine power. Yet geology has revealed compelling evidence that massive ancient floods did occur, though, on a regional rather than global scale, around 7,600 years ago. Melting Ice Age glaciers caused the Mediterranean to breach the Bosporus Strait, flooding the Black Sea basin with such force that ancient shorelines disappeared within days. People living along these coasts would have experienced the event as the end of the world. In Mesopotamia itself, archaeological excavations at sites like Shurpak uncovered thick layers of river silt sandwiched between human occupation layers, evidence of catastrophic flooding. These floods would have devastated agriculture, displaced entire populations, and permanently altered the landscape. Without knowledge of distant lands, ancient peoples perceived these disasters as global events. Over generations, separate catastrophic floods may have been woven together into a single shared legend, explaining why stories from cultures continents apart carry such similar imagery. The Great Flood myth reflects not just a shared human fear of water's destructive power, but a collective memory of real disasters, preserved and retold for thousands of years. Number 1. The City of Atlantis. A lost world with real-life parallels. Plato's account of Atlantis, recorded in the dialogues Timaeus and Critias around 360 BCE, described a massive island civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules' modern-day Strait of Gibraltar. Atlantis was said to be wealthy, technologically advanced, and militarily powerful. its capital designed in concentric rings of land and water connected by canals. It was a utopia of abundance and harmony, until greed and moral corruption took hold. The gods, angered, destroyed Atlantis in a single day and night, submerging it beneath the ocean. Since antiquity, this story has inspired explorers, dreamers, and historians. Theories about its location have ranged from the mid-Atlantic to the Caribbean, even to Antarctica. Skeptics have long argued that Plato invented Atlantis as an allegory to warn against hubris. Yet real historical parallels make the tale harder to dismiss entirely. One of the most compelling theories connects Atlantis to the Minoan civilization of Crete and Thera-modern Santorini. Between 3000 and 1600 BCE, the Minoans built sophisticated multi-story architecture, advanced plumbing systems, and a maritime trade empire across the Aegean. Around 1600 BCE, the volcanic eruption of Thera, of the most violent in human history, devastated the region. Tsunamis struck Crete, ash blanketed the land, crops failed, and trade collapsed. Within a few decades, the Minoan civilization was gone. Excavations at Akrotiri on Santorini have revealed a city frozen in time under volcanic ash, streets lined with fresco-covered homes, storage jars still in place, and evidence of a thriving culture abruptly cut short. The similarities to Plato's Atlantis, advanced seafaring society destroyed suddenly by the sea, are striking. While no direct link has been proven, it's plausible that Plato's story drew on surviving oral traditions about the Minoan disaster, blending fact and moral philosophy into the enduring myth of Atlantis. Whether Atlantis was a real place, a composite of multiple lost cities, or a metaphor, its story continues to captivate because it taps into a universal truth. Even the mightiest civilizations can vanish, almost overnight, leaving only ruins and legends behind. If you enjoyed uncovering the truth behind these incredible legends, don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with your friends who love history and mystery as much as you do. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive into the world's most fascinating stories. And let us know in the comments which of these legends surprised you the most.